For years, fans believed Michael Learned and Ralph Waite were simply two great actors playing the perfect married couple. But behind the scenes, their connection was far more complicated and far more real than anyone ever knew. For nearly a decade, they shared a deep, unspoken affection they never dared to act on, not on set, not in public, and not even as life kept pushing them apart. Now, at 86, Michael Learned has finally broken her silence. And what she reveals about Ralph Waite has stunned longtime fans and changed how people look at the Waltons forever. What was the truth behind their chemistry? And why did she keep it hidden for over 40 years? Let's uncover the story she's finally ready to tell. When the Waltons premiered in 1972, no one expected a quiet Depression-era family drama to become a phenomenon. But almost instantly, viewers felt drawn into the Walton home, and much of that connection came from Michael Learned and Ralph Waite. As Olivia and John Walton Sr., they created a warmth and authenticity that made millions feel like part of their family. What audiences didn't know was that something deeper was happening behind the scenes. Michael, new to television, and Ralph, another trained stage actor, shared an immediate, instinctive bond. Their timing, their emotional rhythm, even the way they looked at each other, none of it was forced. It came naturally, effortlessly. But both understood the boundaries. Michael was married, and Ralph was rebuilding his life after divorce. They made an unspoken agreement never to cross the line, even as the feelings between them quietly grew. Years later, Michael admitted she had fallen for Ralph early in the series. "We were in love," she said, "but we were not lovers." A simple truth, and a powerful one. Their story wasn't defined by romance, but by restraint, respect, and a love they both carried in silence. No one on set ever suspected the truth, but every now and then it slipped through. A glance held a beat too long, a gentle touch that lingered. A scene that felt just a little too real, viewers called it great acting. In reality, it came from something much deeper between them. As the Waltons became a 1970s hit, Michael and Ralph quietly became the show's emotional center. Their on-screen warmth mirrored the bond they shared off-screen. A relationship built on support, laughter, and an unspoken promise neither dared to break. What started as a simple partnership slowly grew into a tender, unspoken love story, hidden behind years of professionalism and restraint. Their connection wasn't dramatic or scandalous. It was quiet, steady, and deeply meaningful. A shared smile, a reassuring touch during a tough scene, a silent glance when emotions ran high. These were the moments where their real feelings slipped through. Co-stars often praised their chemistry, unaware that it ran far deeper than casting. Michael and Ralph challenged each other, comforted each other, and understood one another instinctively, often without saying a word. Yet they never crossed the line. Michael was married when the show began, and even after her marriage ended, she stayed cautious. Ralph, dealing with his own struggles, did the same. Their connection was warm, affectionate, and quietly unmistakable. But it was rooted above all in respect. They were two people drawn to each other, yet held back by circumstance and conscience. Ralph was battling alcoholism and trying to rebuild his life after personal loss, and the timing between them never seemed to align. Both seemed to understand that crossing that invisible line could cost them everything: the show, their reputations, and the deep trust they shared. Still, there were small, human moments that revealed what lay beneath the surface. Michael later recalled how Ralph would sometimes take her hand between scenes, gently and protectively, or lift her spirits on the days she doubted herself. He made her feel safe, understood, and never judged. Their warmth needed no explanation. It simply existed. As the years went by, that quiet affection deepened into something profound. It wasn't passionate or reckless, but steady and enduring. The kind of love that sits quietly in the background, patient and painfully unspoken. Michael once described their connection as spiritual, something that went far beyond physical attraction or typical romance. They were kindred souls shaped by hardship and loss, finding comfort in each other without ever naming what they felt. Even as their closeness grew, they stayed within their boundaries. For nearly a decade, they worked side by side, always close enough to feel the pull, yet always just out of reach. It's tempting to imagine stolen moments or whispered confessions, but their story wasn't that kind. Their love was quieter, sadder, and in many ways far more meaningful. They didn't hold back out of fear. They held back out of respect, for each other, for their work, and for the belief that some bonds are too pure to risk. Even decades later, when Michael finally spoke about their relationship, her words carried no bitterness, only tenderness, nostalgia, and a quiet gratitude for a love that was never spoken aloud but always understood. When the Waltons ended in 1981, it didn't feel like a simple show wrapping up. For Michael Learned and Ralph Waite, it meant stepping away from a world they had built together, moment by moment. Over nearly a decade, both continued to work successfully afterward. Michael in television and theater, Ralph in theater, and later on shows like NCIS and Bones. But nothing ever replaced what the Waltons had meant to them, or the bond they shared while making it. Off-screen, they stayed close friends, supporting each other's work, yet the deeper truth, the quiet connection they never named, remained hidden. For years, Michael kept it entirely to herself, carrying that love privately and respectfully. Only much later, after time softened old emotions, did she begin sharing pieces of the story. She revealed that she had loved Ralph Waite, not dramatically, but deeply and genuinely. It was a love built on mutual respect, shared struggle, and a bond born in the right place at the wrong time. It remained unspoken, yet it endured for decades. For decades, Michael never spoke a word about the feelings she carried. Fans often wondered why she stayed silent, but her quietness wasn't born from fear or shame. It was her way of protecting something precious, a bond too sacred to reduce to gossip or headlines. And perhaps she wasn't ready to confront what it had truly meant, because acknowledging it would mean facing the pain of something that could never be. When she finally did speak, her words were gentle and full of grace. "We were in love," she said, "but we never crossed the line." A simple sentence, yet it held a lifetime of longing, restraint, and quiet heartbreak. Loving someone you can't have, not because the love isn't mutual, but because life, timing, and circumstance won't allow it, carries its own kind of sorrow that was Michael Learned and Ralph Waite. They found something real and beautiful, but they always understood it could only exist unspoken. Even after the Waltons ended, Michael carried that love privately and respectfully. There was a quiet nobility in her silence, a reminder that not all love stories end with a confession or a kiss. Some end with a goodbye, or with feelings held gently inside. Fans long sensed the genuine connection between Olivia and John Walton, and now they understand why the love was real. And so was the decision to keep it unspoken. Michael didn't reveal her truth for attention. She finally shared it because Ralph was gone, and grief has a way of opening doors we kept closed for decades. After 40 years, her heart simply needed to speak. When Ralph Waite passed away in 2014 at 85, tributes poured in from fans and colleagues who remembered him as the gentle, steady heart of the Waltons, a man defined by integrity and warmth. But for Michael Learned, the loss was far more personal. His death closed a chapter she and Ralph had lived for decades, but never dared to write. In interviews from that time, Michael struggled to speak about him without her voice trembling. Their bond had never faded. It had simply gone unspoken, quietly sustained beneath the surface, and with Ralph gone, any chance of ever sharing their true feelings was lost forever. Only then did she finally reveal the truth she had carried alone for 40 years. She had loved him deeply, and she had never told him. The confession resonated with fans because everyone understands the ache of words left unsaid, the moments where timing, duty, or fear steal our courage. Michael believed Ralph had loved her too. They never said it aloud, but both understood it. A private, sacred connection they protected by remaining silent. After his death, something shifted. In her grief, Michael spoke about him with tenderness, without drama or regret. "We never crossed the line," she said softly. "We respected each other too much." Then came the truth she had held for a lifetime. But we were in love. With that, every on-screen glance, every quiet moment between Olivia and John Walton suddenly took on new meaning. It hadn't just been acting. It had been real love, carried quietly, respectfully, and wrapped in restraint. There was never scandal in their story, only two people who met at the wrong time, loved each other quietly, and chose to protect everyone but themselves. After Ralph's passing, Michael carried that grief with the same quiet dignity she always had. She didn't dramatize it or seek attention. She simply honored the truth she had held close for more than 40 years. Her regret was never loud. It lived in softened tones when she spoke his name, in the pauses between her sentences, in memories that surfaced not as pain but as a gentle ache. Michael's story wasn't just about love. It was about timing, boundaries, and the difficult choices we make to protect what matters most, even when those choices cost us a part of ourselves. For Michael, that cost was never telling Ralph how deeply she felt. At least not until it was too late. But when she finally spoke the truth, she offered both herself and fans a quiet sense of peace. The love may have stayed unspoken while he was alive, but it was never forgotten. Years later, viewers look back at the Waltons with new understanding. They no longer see only Olivia and John Walton. They see two real people navigating a love they could never fully claim. For decades, Michael carried that love like a letter she never sent, not because she doubted it, but because she believed it belonged only to them. She never tried to turn it into drama or rewrite their story. She let the Waltons remain what it was, a show about family, strength, and the quiet power of love that doesn't need to be declared to be real, but grief eventually uncovered what she had kept hidden. When Ralph was gone, she finally allowed herself to say it simply. We were in love. Why then? Because sometimes silence is its own form of love, a way of protecting something sacred. Michael stayed silent not out of fear, but out of deep respect for him. And when she finally spoke, it wasn't for attention or sympathy. It was release. And it confirmed what fans had felt all along. The tenderness between Olivia and John Walton came from somewhere real. What makes Michael's story resonate so deeply is that it isn't a Hollywood romance or a tale of missed chances. It's a story of restraint, grace, and the quiet sacrifices people make out of loyalty and timing. When she finally told the truth, she wasn't reopening wounds. She was gently closing them, honoring Ralph, their friendship, and the love they never spoke aloud. She offered no scandal, only honesty. Theirs was never a story of betrayal, but of two people who loved each other in a world that didn't allow that love to exist freely, so they carried it silently, speaking more through glances than words. Decades later, fans now look back on the Waltons with new eyes. That soft hug in the kitchen, the tender goodbyes, the warmth in Ralph's voice. They weren't just performances. They were fragments of a quiet truth Michael had held for over 40 years. In finally sharing it, she gave others permission to acknowledge their own unspoken loves and unfinished chapters. Because love doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's a secret held close for a lifetime. What existed between Michael Learned and Ralph Waite wasn't scripted or rehearsed. It lived in small moments. The look he gave her across the dinner table, the softness in her voice when she called him John, the silence where both understood more than they said. For decades, Michael carried that love privately, not for publicity, but because she believed some things are too sacred to expose. In later interviews, she admitted the two were tempted to explore their feelings. There was even a moment when both were single and made a date to see where things might lead. But when they met, they realized it wouldn't work, and chose not to risk ruining what they had. Michael described their bond as a spiritual marriage, a deep, true love that stayed respectful and unbroken. They spent more hours together on set than with their own families, she said, and inevitably grew close. Fans still tell her that watching the Waltons made them feel safe. And now they know why it felt so real. Because it was.